Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, oh, my girls are such a joy. I have to tell you, to those of you who are interested, on Sunday we had the first of a series of afternoons at Castle Goring with me, and it was really much more fun than I thought it was going to be, and everybody seemed to enjoy it. But the purpose of this is to announce that, please, we have to put up that the September session is already sold out, and it's going to be put up on the website or whatever it's called where they put these things up. So please, nobody, no September anymore. Please, please, please. And because there seems to be such demand for September, it's been suggested to me that I maybe do an extra one in October. So I'm going to do an extra one in October, and that will be posted on wherever these things get posted. I'm very untechnological. So without further ado, I will now plunge in with what Ruth T says. Lady C, what do you make of Canadian lawyer Philip Miller and California marketing executive Camilla Moore, stars of the popular The Art of the Brand podcast, stating that they believe the launch and concept of Meghan Markle's lifestyle business as ever has been one of the worst examples they have ever seen? He even called her a fraud, which is pretty heavy stuff coming from a lawyer. He must realize she could sue him for defamation if it wasn't true. I've added the if it wasn't true, by the way. Roosty simply said, he must realize she could sue him for defamation. She can't sue him for defamation if it's true, nor can she sue him for defamation if he has good reason to think that it is true. And he is now the latest in a series of people to call Meghan Markle a fraud. Well, of course, she herself has said that she was a fraud. So maybe they're all in agreement. Well, according to him, she's a fraud because was never. I don't know why people keep on mistakenly calling it as ever. It's was never. According to him, or I think according to them, it might be more accurate. It's all the creation of that has been to milk her fame ever since she's married Harry, so that she can wait for it, quote unquote, sucker people into buying her stuff. According to Mr. Miller, I love sitting with an H in it. He says, I love sitting with an H in it on people who suck. Meghan Markle sucks as far as I'm concerned. It, meaning as ever, is run by a confederacy of dunces working on this platform that is just maximizing the value from her fame that came from suits and being a part of the royal family. And they're just milking that for everything they can. Now, Mr. Miller and Miss Moore have advised various businesses, including Mercedes-Benz, Dior, Van Cleef & Arpels, Air Canada, L'Oreal, and they say that they think this is a royal disaster. According to him, she is pretending to be a domestic goddess, and most people don't believe it. According to him, the people who have rushed to buy her wine, jam, it's ready spread, crate mix, and tea shows how gullible a lot of consumers are. Well, I don't think Mr. Miller seems to understand that it's not that many people who are gullible, because Netflix has had to be very careful in investing the minimum to pretend that it's going to be a great success. So if you sell out a line within a few hours, it means you have underproduced the items in the line. Why would Netflix have underproduced and continue to underproduce? Because they don't want to be losing any more money than they have to lose. So if they know that they will shift 500 or 2,000 of an item, which is paltry stuff, incidentally, they will produce only that number of items in that range. Meghan has had great ambitions. Meghan is incorrigibly greedy. She's one of those people whose eyes are bigger than her stomach. And sadly, everybody's now on to her. This really does not bode well for negotiations with Netflix, where she's concerned. But I am advised it bodes very well where Netflix is concerned, because Netflix will be able to use things like this to drive down the price even lower than it already is. And it's evidently pretty low at this point. 10 tears left eye. Just, can you imagine, after all the sacrifices I've made? I mean, can you imagine how I've ascended that greasy pole? Licky, licky, one lollipop at a time, because I love candy. And look at it now, it's all unraveling. I wanted to be a billionaire, and I'm simply married to a humble little millionaire. I mean, he can't even afford our own jet. I mean, talk about failing a girl. I mean, what's a girl supposed to do? Well, Megsy baby, maybe you could go off to Bill Gates. I mean, you're maybe 30 years too old for Bill Gates. Well, certainly 25. But who knows? Maybe as he gets older, he'll be interested in a hot chick like you, because remember, you're fabulous. Look at those long legs that go on forever. It made me a supermodel. Yeah, I used to be a supermodel. Only thing is, not even the super in the building knew about me being a supermodel. No. The whole thing is desperate. It reeks of desperation. And it's very interesting that Harry and Meghan are yet again sending out mixed messages. On the one hand, he wants a reconciliation with his family. On the other hand, they're leaking that he still wants an apology from the king, no less, because they have not tolerated his and Meghan's rubbish. So, mixed messages yet again. And what are we supposed to believe? I think we can believe Mr. Miller. Meghan's a fraud. pig in lipstick is still a pig. Why am I so mean to Megxie baby? Erica Besudenhout, I hope that's correctly pronounced, says, Charles's gardeners have a revolving door. And what do I make of it? Well, of course, there was a story in the Sunday Times, the latest in their long list of anti-monarchy stories. I mean, Rupert Murdoch is partly deflecting. It's part of this is deflection. They need to distract from the fact that Trump is suing the Wall Street Journal, and they are in big trouble if that does not get resolved. And the Sunday Times is used as a Trojan horse by Rupert Murdoch to try to infiltrate Troy so that they can then have all of the anti-royalists being fed ammunition. He's done it with Prince Michael and Simon Redding a few years ago, trying to make out something that was terrible where it really wasn't terrible, etc., etc. He did it with the Morton book and my book, Andrew Morton's book in 1992, which they very, very cleverly dovetailed and stole the publicity from my book and confused the public for a while as to the fact that the two books had the same title when they didn't, and then sort of went with the fact that the Morton book was factual when in fact it was fictional, but it was calculated to damage the royal family, and to a large extent it did. So this latest story is in part deflection, and it has some merit though, because 11 of the 12 gardeners have left, some of long standing, and certainly one of the complaints rings true, because the royal family is not as rich as people think they are. And now that Charles has had to subsidize Highgrove out of his own pocket, he has actually found a way of getting Highgrove to, wherever possible, subsidize itself. Because he has Highgrove on a lease, a 20-year lease, which he and everybody else thinks will see him out. So he has protected his interest in Highgrove, which is owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. So he ceased to have a right to it, save for the agreement he struck with the Duchy of Cornwall for him to lease Highgrove for £340,000 per annum, which is actually a very generous amount of money to lease it for. And now it has to, as they say in the vernacular, wash its face. And one of the things is that the selling points of Highgrove is the garden. And they have had huge turnovers with gardeners who are on very basic salaries, sometimes minimum wage. And why is that? Because the royal family has traditionally taken the view that, going back to the days when courtiers were aristocrats and worked for the royal family, for the honor, and they didn't need the money. Nowadays, a lot of the people who work for the royal family need the money. However, the old system still prevails, whereby the royal family will give low wages in return for the employees being honored by having by working for the royal family. And what happens then is that there's a tremendous turnover, because a lot of people go into the jobs, whether it's Buckingham Palace or Highgrove as gardeners or footmen, whatever. Many of them go in with the knowledge that an affiliation with the royal family will look good on their CV and get them a better job elsewhere. So in some ways, it's not that clever a system, because if you underpay people, they ultimately have no incentives to stay with you if they need the money. So, but also Charles is, according to the reports, and I think they're actually sound and sensible, he's very picky, he's very precise. The garden is one of his great dreams and one of his great accomplishments. And he is very punctilious and precise, and he expects results, but it's been causing problems. So there's a large turnover of staff. It has to be said, the economic climate for the last few years has not been great. And now that the Highgrove operation has to effectively be self-sufficient, of course they're struggling, and they will continue to struggle, even though the operation is now very successful. But it's not going to remain successful forever if they don't get their staff problems, shall we say, rectified. I think they need to actually up the ante a little bit in terms of staff payments. Let's leave it at that. But it doesn't surprise me that the Sunday Times has done this. The Sunday Times is a British Murdoch paper, and the American Murdoch press is in big trouble. So let's leave it at that for the moment. Kathleen Rose says, Trump and Putin must have done Lady C some big favors. She defends the indefensible at every opportunity. Oh dear. Before answering the question, I'm going to read the riposte that came from Jack3271. The TDS troll has appeared, along with the Russian hoax. So boring. Well, I don't know why you think I'm defending the indefensible, when I'm not. I never do defend the indefensible. But you're entitled to your opinion, Kathleen Rose. And please feel free to continue commenting. And may I point out, you're absolutely right. Putin did me a big favor. He behaved honorably, decently, and correctly at a time that communism was still a factor in Russia. And am I appreciative of what he did? Yes, I am. Does that mean that I would excuse him if he did things that I felt were untoward? No, it doesn't. And I will tell you, to those of you who don't know, and I'm sure Kathleen Rose doesn't know, so I'm happy to tell her. When I went to pick up the adoption papers for Dima at the Smolny Institute, which in those days, this was July 1993, the Smolny Institute was the headquarters of the Anatoly Sobchak mayoralty. And one of the people there objected to the fact that I was being allowed, on the basis that I was an aristocrat, to adopt a Russian baby. And Putin, I was told, is the one who said no, she should have that baby because she will give the baby a good life. I have a feeling my son Dima, Kathleen Rose, would agree with you that Putin did him and me a great favour by not being class prejudiced and not being dogmatic and not going with political invective and deciding that Dima should suffer as an orphan in a Russian orphanage, just so that presumably those who are prejudiced would pat themselves on the back at how noble they were being in having adhered to their wondrous, wondrous beliefs. So that's Putin. He did me a favour, yes. And I'm sure he did other people favours as well. Was it the right thing to do? Yes. Was it the Christian thing to do? Yes. Was it the good thing to do? Yes. Should you condemn him for it? Plainly, you think you should. Well, you feel free to condemn him. And maybe while you're about it, you'd like to condemn Jesus Christ for having said things like, suffer the little children to come on to me, etc., etc. But please feel free to indulge your prejudices. I'm certainly not going to deprive you of the right. As for Trump's never done me a favour, and I don't see why he would need to do me a favour. So you're wrong on that score, but you're certainly right where Putin did me a good turn. He didn't know me from Adam. He did it because he thought it was the right thing to do. And shall I tell you, it took some courage for him to do it, because he was surrounded by die-hard communists in the Smolny Institute, one of whom actually tried to scupper the adoption. Maybe you'd have preferred that. Oh dear, it just goes to show when people have such strong beliefs, but no heart. KJT says, Lady C, many of us come to you because you're not only intelligent and well-connected, but also balanced and sensible. Thank you for that. I know you're not American and have said, by and large, you don't like getting sucked into American politics. But could you please briefly touch upon what might arguably be the biggest news story of our age, namely that President Obama and his circle are going to be investigated for having orchestrated or at least allowed Russiagate to keep President Trump out of office in 2016. I'm delighted to comment on it. First of all, I'm going to make a point that might surprise Kathleen Rose, for one, and certainly people of that ilk. If President Obama, as the sitting president, suspected that there might be some interference from Russia, he was well within his rights to require that it be properly investigated, not that he capitalize upon it to make it improperly and illegally investigated. But that would be a matter for a court to decide. And it could well end up in court. And the thing is, though, President Obama did this while he was a sitting president. As a sitting president, insofar as I am aware, he possesses sovereign immunity, even though it happened in 2016. It happened when he was the sitting president. So I don't think that the newspapers are right when they say that he could end up being charged with a crime. I don't think he can, whether he committed a crime or not. That's very important. And that also, I need to make the point, because the media are so flaky and so off the wall and make such stupid claims, because sovereign immunity applies. So that's where Obama is concerned. Where the others are concerned, it's a horse of a different colour. Now, Tulsi Gabbard and Pam Bondi are much in the news about all of this. And I am going to be very careful what I say. But it certainly appears as if Comey, who does not have, and never did have, and never can have sovereign immunity, Brennan, Clapper, Kevin Feinsman. Remember Kevin Feinsman? The agent who doctored evidence in 2016 so that he could alter things just enough for black to become white and innocence to become guilt. They're in the frame. And quite frankly, if they tried to destroy the chances of a politician from being rightfully elected as president, just so that they could have retained power, I think they ought to all be in the dock. And it applies if they happen to be Republican. The same thing would apply. The principle should apply. I also have to say I am not in favor of the French way of doing things, where as soon as a centrist or right-wing president is out of power, the judiciary and the police are all over him to create wrongdoing where there is either none or it's perfectly understandable in the context of world leaders who actually do have to sometimes get their hands grubby. All of them. And I've said this time and again. I'm no moralist where politics are concerned. And why would I be? Because effective leadership requires that you sometimes be pretty, shall we say, grubby. Why do you think Talleyrand was such a great foreign secretary? I leave it at that for the moment. But insofar as what's going on now, it could end up being the greatest scandal of the age. It could. This could put Watergate in the shade. It well might. Let's see what happens. Sorry. Tanya Fabregas says, I wonder if Ghislaine Maxwell will too suffer the same fate as the other two. If it turns out to be the case, then there is something seriously fishy going on, in my opinion. I think it's utterly disgraceful that no Americans are languishing in jail, but money buys fraud and deceit. Well, of course, no Americans are going to be languishing in American jail, Tanya Fabregas. Why would they? I mean, you don't think that they're going to be putting President Clinton in jail or Hillary? I mean, come on, So, convenient scapegoats. Alan Dershowitz has made a very, very important point in the last few days. He has said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, that Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail serving the time that Jeffrey Epstein should have been serving in prison. If, and he didn't say this, but I'm going to qualify by saying, if the American state had the right to breach its agreement with him, and I don't think it did. I think a nation, when it gives its word, should stick to it. It should not say, oh, well, I really didn't mean it. I crossed my fingers. That's not the way honourable politics and honourable governance is conducted. I may be no great moralist where the motives and sometimes the demeanour of world leaders would be concerned, but I'm certainly a great believer in the ethics of government and the fact that honour requires that there are certain things you simply don't do. And one of them is strike a legal agreement with someone and then breach it because you've decided, oh, well, it's going to be convenient. That's dishonourable behaviour. So let us see what happens. But will Ghislaine Maxwell suffer the same fate as the other two? I'm not quite sure who the second one is that you're referring to. I'm not sure if you're referring, I really don't know, and I cannot anticipate, and I prefer not to guess. But I would imagine you're speaking about the fate Jeffrey Epstein endured. Well, anything is possible. It depends to what extent the people in whose interest it would be to allow Ghislaine Maxwell, who knows an awful lot and has indicated that she's willing to testify before Congress about what happened. And Alan Dershowitz has made the point, and I agree with him, that she should be allowed to testify before Congress. And I agree with him, she should be released from prison. She has no business being in prison. If Virginia Giuffre wasn't in prison, she shouldn't be in prison. As simple as that. And when people say, well, Virginia Giuffre suffered and she was abused, so did Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father was, by common consent, quite an abusive parent. So let's leave it at that. If charity should be directed towards one, it should be directed towards the other. There's that consideration. There's also the fact that she is dishonorably in prison. And it behooves the United States of American government to start to behave with more honor than they're behaving. And if she is released from prison and given immunity against prosecution and sang like a bird, but the thing is, do they want her to sing like a bird? That's the thing. Because if she sings and she says certain things that become inconvenient for certain people, oh dear, how's that going to go down? Because let's not forget that irrespective of which political party is in power, there are the bureaucrats in Washington, as there are in London and in Brussels and in Berlin and in Paris, who really have their fingers very tightly encircling various throats, ready to throttle if you do not do what they regard it as desirable for you to do. And this, incidentally, is a figure of speech. It's not intended to be taken strictly speaking literally. But I do not see that it is in the interest of the bureaucrats or ultimately either the Republicans or the Democrats to have too much light shed on the shady way in which all governments, including the government of the United States of America, conducts its business. And anybody who thinks that you're dealing with priests in a pulpit, think again. You're not. You're dealing with really slick, sharp, pretty much often unscrupulous operators. Don't take my word for it. Ask Kevin Feinsman when he's starting to sing like a bird because of what he did to try to drop Trump in it with that ludicrous nonsense about Russiagate, that the Russians were going to do this, that, and the other, even though the CIA and FBI's own evidence is that there was no indication of any of it, until, of course, it suited them but to decide to the contrary. So let's see. And am I cynical? You bet I'm cynical. Absolutely cynical. I'm cynical because I was born into a family with influence, and all my life I have mixed with people who were features politically. In Jamaica, my mother's first cousin was a minister in the government, the Honourable Danvers Williams. My father's cousin, one was in the JLP as a senator. The other was in the PNP as an assistant at Jamaica House, uh, knowing what was going on. And actually, in 1980, went and tipped off each and every member of the family and said that Michael Manley had had a meeting in Jamaica House and had decided that when they got in again, which of course they didn't, within 3 days they would come and round up my father and the other senior male members of our family, deprive them of their citizenship, even though they were all born in Jamaica, on the basis that they were white oppressors of black people. Like that was a crime. Because there's no such crime on the statute books. And also, my father's family, if anything, were the absolute opposite. But I just throw all of that in for good measure so that you see, if I'm a little bit cynical, there's a reason why. It's called knowledge. Sandra Norden says, Maxwell is in prison because she procured underage women for Epstein's use. She is a scapegoat of sorts, as Epstein's friends and users of these young women on the lists have pretty much gone scot-free, including Prince Andrew. Well, Prince Andrew certainly hasn't gone scot-free. He's had his life destroyed, and there's absolutely no evidence beyond the word of a renowned liar and a self-confessed liar that he did what she alleged he did. And I mean, why has Bill Clinton never, ever been put in the frame? I just ask that for what it's worth, because we all know that Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein shared similar tastes in that they liked them hot and young, not underage, incidentally, young, big difference. And as Alan Dershowitz just said, Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison because Jeffrey Epstein isn't around to serve the sentence that he should have been serving if anybody was going to serve it, not her. So, Norma Mimosa says, an interesting aspect of Diana and landmines. I think, I might be wrong, that she was only involved in 2 landmine publicity events. I believe she was invited rather than initiating the events. Yet the publicity worked. She became the heroine of the anti-landmine movement. Meanwhile, if I mention the name Jody Williams, almost no one can tell me who she is. But she is the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in coordinating the world anti-landmine movement. She is the heroine of the anti-landmine movement. She certainly is. Thanks for that, Norma Mimosa. I used to sit on the fundraising committee for the Red Cross. I was one of the people who sat on the committee and organized certain things. And you are, to an extent, right. Diana was approached by the Red Cross and invited to attend, to bring attention to their desire for the landmines to be cleared. And in January 1997, she went to Angola as their guest. She did endorse their campaign, but their campaign was at loggerheads with the government's campaign, which was to achieve the same objective. And the objective was achieved in 1999 after the Conservative government had been voted out of power and Tony Blair's government, the Labour government, had been voted in. But in 1997, when Diana went to Angola, she was roundly criticised by Lord Howe, who was the junior defence minister. He called her a loose cannon and ill-informed. Nicholas Soames, who was Winston Churchill's grandson, he also had no good to say about what Diana was doing. And she did it. I'll tell you what Diana said, because it's important. Let's put the words in her mouth. She said, "I'm not a political figure, nor do I want to be one. I come with my heart and I want to bring awareness to people in distress, whether it is in Angola or any part of the world. The fact is, I am a humanitarian figure, always have been and always will be." In June, she delivered a speech at the Royal Geographical Society in London, and she called for an end to the plague on earth caused by landmines. 2 months later, just a few weeks before she died, she went to Bosnia to see the landmine clearing activities of the Red Cross. Now, at the time, there was a lot of concern that the Red Cross was using Diana to promote itself and steal credit for the treaties that the governments were trying to achieve. So that is what was going on. Would the Red Cross have done it? Certainly, of course they would have. They are an international charity. They do an awful lot of good work. But they also like to get attention and they like to get donations. And Diana was very happy to jump on that bandwagon because it was going to do her good as well. Remember, Diana at the time was leading a very different life from the life she had led as a royal. She was striking out on her own as a divorced and independent woman, and she had given up most of her charities, like over 100 of them, if I remember correctly. And she only had a handful of causes, and it had to be high profile, and it had to be something that was going to gain her kudos, because she wanted to do the minimal amount of work and achieve the maximum amount of effect. And I'm not criticizing her for that. You could say that was a very wise way of using her time, because she also wanted her own private life. She wanted to marry again. She wanted to marry Hajnat Khan. He refused to marry her. She then dumped him and was speaking about marrying Dodi Fayed, and she died. So Let's put it in its context. Diana was not the heroine of the landmines movement. It was Jody Williams. Nobody knows who Jody Williams is. Everybody says, Diana, Diana, Diana. Well, it wasn't Diana. It was Jody Williams. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what ground you would like us to be covering. Okay? Thank you so much. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed.